Hello, dear book lovers. Today we are going to take a look at an interesting fanfic that I found for you. At the end of each part, there will be a summary and my thoughts on that passage. I hope you'll find it interesting, but if not, I'll leave an interactive link to the next video throughout my reflections. Summary. It had been a slash across her chest from a White Walker's sword that finally ended her life. Sansa landed in a puddle of her own blood, and she died quickly, quietly. And then she'd awoken with a gasp, trembling, in a bed that had burned under Theon's betrayal. If you try to break me, you will bleed, by Dialux. Chapter 1. Stark. It all started the night she burst into their rooms. The door banged against the wall, not loud enough to mask her high, piercing wail. Catelyn startled and bolted upright as Ned grunted and rolled out of bed, unsheathing his greatsword in a single, graceless motion. Sansa, illuminated in moonlight, dropped to her knees, staring at them with the eyes that looked simultaneously terrified and hopeful, disbelieving and stunned and, for a heartbeat, incandescently happy. "Ned," Catelyn hissed, "you're scaring her?" Ned blinked and lurched to the side for a moment, before registering Sansa's hiccups. Then he tossed his sword aside. Catelyn winced at the clatter of steel on stone and crossed the last few feet in a large stride, wrapping Sansa in a warm embrace. At his touch, Sansa flinched, recoiled, and threw herself into his arms, all in one motion. Her sobs became louder, spurring Catelyn out of their bed as well. "Sweetling," Ned murmured once she'd stopped shuddering so violently. "What happened? What's the matter?" Sansa only buried her face in his chest as if she were a babe once more and mumbled, "A dream." But when questioned further, she wouldn't respond. Catelyn tried as well, only to be met with louder sobs and a daughter more distraught than she'd ever seen her. Catelyn and Ned exchanged worried looks. Sansa had never been their quietest child, but she had been the one they didn't worry about. None of the responsibilities Robb would have, none of Arya's wildness or Bran's penchant for climbing dangerous heights. She'd been the calm, steady one of the children. Perhaps they'd been too complacent. In time, Sansa had consented to slipping into their bed and slept curled between the two of them. The next morning, while she still slumbered, Ned went to speak to Robb. He returned looking grim. "Robb says that she came to his chambers last night too," he told Catelyn quietly. "She was crying and choking and said something about a crown, nothing completely coherent. Then she hugged him, gasped, and ran. He doesn't know anything else." "A crown?" Catelyn asked. "A crown of iron and steel," Ned said. "A crown of swords," were her actual words. "There is only one such crown, Catelyn, and it hasn't been in use for centuries. I don't know where she might have gotten such an accurate description." Catelyn drew a hand across her face. "You mean the crown of northern kings?" It wasn't a question, but Ned treated it as one. "Yes." She turned to their daughter, who slept curled around herself, tight as Cheyenne yarn. Sansa looked young and pale, her dark red hair shining like burnished copper in the early light. Her tears had faded and she didn't look anything like the broken-down version that she had appeared scarce hours before, simply young and beautiful. "Let's hope it was just a dream, yes?" Ned asked, wrapping his arms around hers. Catelyn sighed, relaxing into his embrace, and nodded. Over the next few days, Catelyn oversaw her eldest daughter. Sansa had always been soft, a candle-lit flame in the night. No glorious sunset as Robb, no fierce forge fire as Arya, no ever-burning lamp as Bran, flickering and constant and lovely, in a manner that the others couldn't hope to become. But now, Sansa looked wearier than she ever had before. She'd apologize when she awoke, color high in her cheeks and eyes averted, but never looked truly repentant. Her hands never twitched with glee or excitement as they used to. Her hair, which she had once spent hours braiding in the southern fashion, was suddenly pulled back in a single utilitarian braid. Ned had accepted her apology with grace, and though Rob still stared at her slightly worriedly, they were all moving past it. All save Catelyn, who saw something sharp in Sansa's eyes, something old and stern and fierce, as even Arya at her angriest wasn't. Sansa laughed with Jane and Beth easily enough, but her eyes watched over the rest of her family almost endlessly, almost restlessly. Catelyn worried for her soft-hearted, flame-haired daughter because she didn't know what was going on and didn't like what she saw up until she didn't. Sansa dragged Robb to her rooms a week later, and they'd spoken of something. The following days, she looked more contented than at any time after her dream. On Bran's name day, they held a feast, and in the bright light of the feasting hall, Sansa laughed and danced and sang as if back to normal. "You'll be all right," thought Catelyn. "You are a Stark of the North, a Tully of the Riverlands. You will be cold as ice and deadly as the storm. There is nothing in all the realms that can temper you, my dear, dear daughter." It was true, though Catelyn Stark did not know it. When Sansa awoke these days, she did so silently. Of her old life, she remembered enough to make her dizzy, to make her tremble and shake and want to crack open. Robb dead, her parents dead, Rickon dead, the fates of Bran and Arya unknown. Jon had been all that was left to her, and even that had been taken from her by the Dragon Queen. Sansa had survived. But the price had been her heart, her soul, a great measure of her sanity. It had been a slash across her chest from a White Walker's sword that finally ended her life. Sansa landed in a puddle of her own blood, and she died quickly, quietly. And then she'd awoken with a gasp, trembling, in a bed that had burned under Theon's betrayal. It had been a luxury that Sansa had almost forgotten, to feel the strength of her father's arms, the cool warmth of her mother's hands running through her hair, the steady, unshaken growth of Robb into a king the North could love and obey. She'd almost forgotten it until she had it thrown back in her face. And now, young and beautiful, and with a whole life spinning out in front of her, Sansa was determined to wrest some control back to herself. She appeared 9 years of age. There were yet 3 more years for Sansa to find a path, to change the course of fate enough that her family didn't die. "Winter is coming," thought Sansa, wrapping cold fingers around the woolen hem of her cloak. "Winter is coming, and the lions will falter, the stags will freeze, the flowers will shrivel. But we wolves will thrive, and they will sing 1,000 songs of the blood staining our teeth." "You call this stitching?" Jane Poole's voice echoed in the room, and further, into the hallway Robb and Jon were walking down. The gentle murmur of voices ground to a halt, likely in favor of seeing the verbal sparring match between the Lady Horseface and the Lady Sansa once more. Or rather, Lady Sansa's companions. Arya didn't respond, though Jon could easily imagine her flashing eyes. For whatever reason, she appeared loath to actually engage. Jane couldn't let it go by. She continued, "It's horrible. I could do better when I was 5. What kind of a lady doesn't know how to wield a needle?" "Say that when I have a sword in my hand," Arya snapped, sounding at the end of her patience. Robb winced, wrapping an arm around his elbow where Arya had struck him the night before. Jon grinned. There was one person Robb didn't mind beating him in the training yard, and she had dark hair and gray eyes like the direwolf she loved. The Starks' love for each other rarely extended to outsiders, and so appeared chilly to most, but the strength of their bonds within the family was matched by little. "Jane," came another voice that took Jon a moment to place. It was only after Robb mouthed Sansa that he got it. "That's enough." A pause, and then, "Arya, I prefer if you didn't threaten my friends." "She started it," Jane began. Simultaneously, Arya bit out, "Friends." "Jane, you couldn't do a single bit of embroidery before you turned 7, and Arya's better at it now than you ever were," Sansa said suddenly. Into the slightly shocked silence that followed, Jon heard something clatter as if placed roughly on a table. And no true lady would have answered Arya's baits. "Which, yes, I recognized Arya. You couldn't be more obvious if you ran after Jane with a little Jon Snow and Theon Greyjoy on your shoulders. Get over yourself, both of you."
"Little Jon Snow," Arya said flatly. Sansa's voice suddenly became sharper, adopting a tone that made one sit up and pay attention. Not angry or sad or even loud, just a sort of honed command that seemed to make the very wind bend to her whims.
"I know you don't care for sewing, but it isn't just important for embroidery and pretty things, Arya. I know Septa Mordane's told you about the first Blackfire Rebellion. You know that when her husband, the Lord Tyrell, fought against his men in the Reach, there weren't enough maesters. And so the Lady Tyrell gathered all the best dressmakers in Highgarden, and all the ladies who were best at embroidering, all onto the battlefield, and told them to sew the injured men up. It saved the battle twice over." She sighed. "You won't get anywhere near good enough to do that if you don't practice, though." "I can't do this all day like you," Arya said, but her voice came slower, as if she were listening, and she at least didn't sound so prickly as only moments before Sansa's speech.
8 hours a week and you go off for the rest to play at swords with Robb," Sansa said.
4. I can't do any more."
"Not if you don't try." 7.
4, said Arya. Sansa. "We spend 2 hours a day sewing, and right now you can't sneak away for even half of them. This is a good deal."
5. 6, said Sansa. "And that's the lowest it's going to go if you want me to cover your absence from Mother?"
Arya paused.
"Cover my absence?"
"If you decide to play at swords, and Mother comes looking, did you expect me to keep quiet?" Sansa asked impatiently.
Robb looked somewhere between flabbergasted and highly amused. A moment later, he heard Arya's quiet cough. Jon rolled his eyes.
"Well, 6 hours a week," Sansa said. "You get 8 hours to go poke at Robb and get wooden splinters in your hands, Arya. But these 6 hours you spend here, you try. You listen. You don't start swearing under your breath like a hoodlum, or making fun of my friends as if you're in the pigpen with bastards and small folk. Is it a deal?"
There was a long, stretching silence, and then the gentle rasp of skin against skin. Arya must have taken Sansa's hand. "Yes," she said. "Deal." There was a small protesting noise from someone else, and Jon heard Arya muffle a snicker with the same graceless choke she usually did. A moment later, he realized why. "And you," Sansa began ominously, a stinging note creeping into her voice that even Lady Catelyn at her worst didn't have. Jane swallowed, loud enough to hear outside the room, and Robb doubled over in laughter. His little sister, soft, sweet Sansa, was terrifying her companions into submission. Sansa, the girl who loved songs and pretty things, had bargained with her sister to spend time wielding a needle into actually paying attention to it. Had someone told Jon that he'd hear this conversation even a week ago, he'd have laughed. But now he remembered with a sudden chill the look on her face when she'd burst into Robb's rooms, the rooms that they shared. She'd thrown herself at Robb with a gasp and a cry, and the angle had been such that Jon could see clearly the emotions playing across her face. Sansa had never been good at hiding them, but he hadn't known what that depth of grief and love and relief meant. What had she seen that had terrified her so? Arya had asked a few mornings later, over breakfast. Sansa's face had paled to a degree that he'd rarely seen on a human being, and she'd excused herself almost immediately. Arya didn't actually apologize, Jon was sure, but she also hadn't pestered Sansa for more information. It was as good as one from Arya. They turned and left, slipping into the shadowed rooms a few doors down, and Robb said, scarcely holding on to his composure, "She took that from Uncle Benjen." The voice, the anger. "I bet you she did the eyebrow thing, too." "And you," he mimicked, letting his voice fall into a lower register, "don't be stupid. I know so much better than you. Just keep your head down and tongue in your mouth, idiot boy." "Oh, if only you had," Jon murmured.
Robb turned pink. "I didn't know he actually meant it. I'm the heir." "I'm sure your Uncle Benjen knows what being a leader means." Nobody talks to me like that. The gods know they should, your head's getting too big. Jon. Jon flashed him an unrepentant grin, and Robb lunged towards him, teeth bared just as sharp as gray winds. And that was all he remembered of Sansa for quite some time. First, she spoke to Robb. Sansa had never been a good liar. Her face held her emotions clearly, and she'd learned over the years to see it as an asset instead of a liability. But if she were to achieve anything, she'd need a friend, a confidant, and Robb was the best liar of all her siblings. She locked the door and lifted her chin. She'd need mental fortitude to do this. I want you to give me your word that you'll tell no one of what I say to you next. Why'd you lock the door? He asked suspiciously. Because I wanted a private conversation, she replied. I want to talk to you about things that happened. Or maybe not things that happened, but things that can happen, and well. Please, Robb? I, Robb said, petulant and irritable and majestically 13 years old, am not giving you anything until you unlock that door. So you don't want to know what I know? Sansa arched an eyebrow. Pity. I'm sure that father wants to hear all about your recent trip to Wintertown, you know. I mean, it isn't like he'd be very disappointed in the actions of his eldest son. What are you talking about? Sansa widened her eyes. Didn't Theon take you to a brothel last week? He flushed bright red. You aren't supposed. I saw you leave in the night, she interrupted. I saw you, Robb. How many other people do you think must have done it if I could? And Theon never keeps his mouth shut on anything, so, you know, it wasn't that big of a jump to make. Robb's jaw worked furiously. Fine. What do you want? For you to listen. Sansa reached forward, lacing her fingers through his. For a moment, she thought he might not acquiesce. But then his shoulders slumped, and he nodded once to himself. All right. I swear on Uncle Brandon's statue down in the crypts. Sansa waited, and he sighed impatiently. Never to tell anyone what you tell me. Good enough? Yes. She paused, trying to think of a way to phrase it. I've seen this before, she said finally. You've seen what before? Everything. Everything. Sansa felt her shoulders twitch upwards, defensive, as she forced them down, forced them level and calm and steady as the flat turrets of Winterfell. I remember things that haven't happened yet, Robb. Horrible things. Do you remember when I came to your room, crying? I had a dream that night. A dream where everyone dies. Dreams aren't real, Robb retorted. Sansa swallowed hard. Perhaps not. But there were names of people that I've never met in this world in the dream. Names that I've checked in the library, and they're all correct. Do you know who Sandor Clegane is? He's the Hound. Do you know what Oberyn Martell's, the younger brother of the ruler of Dorne Paramore's, name is? Hilario Sand? I know these things, Robb, and they're real and they're true, and I'm terrified right now. Does something happen? Robb asked. What doesn't happen to us? In 3 years, the king will come to Winterfell to ask Father to be his hand. And Father will go with him, and he'll take me and Arya with him as well. Will he marry you off to the crown prince? He drawled. Sansa felt tears irrational, infuriating sting the corners of her eyes. I'll be betrothed to Joffrey, she said flatly. But I'll never be queen. Father finds something that has Joffrey's mother arrest him, and then Joffrey calls for Father's head. And I watch as Island Payne beheads our own father with his own greatsword. And does Father's great friend Robert Baratheon just sit there as this happens? He's dead, Sansa snapped. He dies, and it turns out that his true-born heirs are actually products of incest, and when Father finds out about this, Cersei Lannister kills him. Arya runs away. The Lannisters marry me off to Tyrion Lannister. You declare yourself king of the north, and Joffrey beats me for being your sister, and then you die, and Mother dies as well, and Theon burns Winterfell, and Rickon dies, and then... She was crying. She realized distantly. Hot tears ran down her cheeks, shortening the breath that remained in her lungs. She knew how that sentence ended, too. And then Jon leaves, and I die inside the castle I was born in. Robb shuffled closer, wrapping an arm around her awkwardly. That hasn't happened yet, he said. It did, she whispered. And if I do nothing, it'll happen again. I love you, Robb, and I can't survive if they kill you again. A moment later, she heard what he'd said, yet. It hasn't happened yet. You believe me? I think that you believe what you're saying, he sighed. But it's something I've never heard of before, things from the future. It's just really. I don't know why I came back, Sansa told him. I don't. But I'm here, and I can, and I will help you. Please, Robb, tell me that you'll help. What do you want me to do? Sansa closed her eyes. She remembered cold steel ripping into her lungs, the blood that spilled across the ground, the darkness that stole across her vision. She had died, and she had come back, and she would never again be that defenseless girl. I need you to teach me. Breath in, breath out. She hated this, hated having to do this, but there was a dead thing in her chest and a need for blood that she had never fed and a fear that never dimmed. I need you to teach me how to wield a sword. Robb choked. A sword? More Arya's thing, I know. But I refuse, Robb, to be helpless once more. I know what happens when I've no man to protect me. And I will die if that must happen once more. Do you hear me? I will protect you. It isn't enough, Sansa said, feeling the cold chill of vulnerability seep into her bones. It is not enough. She turned away. A moment later, she felt Robb's hand weigh on her shoulder. Fine, but I want something in return. What? She asked wearily. Robb looked grim and angry, but his hand was warm on her shoulder, even through her gown, and his tully blue eyes, their mother's eyes, were soft. Tell me what happened to you, he said. I'll teach you how to wield a sword, how to use one and clean one, and everything else that I know. And you'll tell me about this world that you've come from, where all of us are dead and you are alone. Sansa paused. It ached, even to think of that life. But perhaps it would become easier if she spoke of it, as lancing a wound might be. Very well, she told him, reaching forward and gripping his palm in hers tightly. I promise to do so. When do you want to get started? Robb drew back, hands slipping out of hers. For a moment he just looked at her, and then he lifted his chin proudly, eyes lightening with amusement. Tonight. Do you think you can make it to the Godswood? Sansa bit her lip, amused. Robb didn't know half of what she'd sneaked into, from leaving King's Landing to fleeing Winterfell under the Boltons. Going to the Godswood would be almost ridiculously easy now. Bring a sword, she told him, even smiled a little. And I'll tell you all about a little boy who grew up to be a king. Robb frowned. Sansa wasn't, in all honesty, truly terrible at swords. She'd always been a good dancer, and the smooth grace of that translated to this venture as well. But she had little in the way of muscles, and he suspected that little Rickon had more idea of blocking and stabbing than Sansa did. He might have given up an hour had Sansa not looked so fiercely determined to continue. She was sweaty and aching. Robb ached just to think about holding the sword on his first day of practice for so long, but she wasn't willing to stop. With her cloak shed and her swirling movements, at once graceful and jarringly wrong, he would have laughed, but every time it bubbled in his throat. He remembered her pale skin and large, tired eyes, and it faded as if it had never existed. After, gown dripping sweat and dark hair plastered to her forehead, she slumped against the weirwood tree and plucked the waterskin from his hand. So what do you want to know? Robb hesitated. She'd looked even more frightened when he proposed the trade, eyes flicking away before coming back to meet his with cold resolve. He didn't want to hurt her, but this might have been easier. "You said I'd be a king when you came to my rooms last week." He cocked his head to the side. "Were you honest?" "The first king in the north for almost 3 centuries," she replied easily. "They said you never lost a battle, too. You were an amazing battle commander." "But you were with the Lannisters then?" "Yes," Sansa said quietly. "Then how did you know that I'd win battles? It just makes more sense to keep you ignorant if you're a hostage, doesn't it?" Sansa looked away, and then her eyes met his once more, frozen and glittering and lovely as the pools in the Godswood. Joffrey was a cruel boy, but he was never smart. Every time you won a battle, he'd call me to the throne room and I'd have the King's Guard beat me. "Beat you?" Robb asked, aghast. Then snarling, "Beat you?" "Yes. He had me named you a traitor, named father a traitor, named Bran and Rickon and Arya and mother all traitors even after you died. I had to," she breathed in suddenly, and the rage brewing in his gut knotted in on itself in the face of her clear misery. "You're going to get amazing with that sword," he said, low and intense. "And if anyone tries to touch you again, you will gut them, and then you will give me their names and I will slit their throats. Do you hear me?" "I begged the gods to protect you when I prayed," she said softly. "Every day. But you still died. And then I refused to do it any longer. If..." Robb cut her off, clapped his hands over her mouth and swallowed hard, felt bile rise in his throat along with the regret, along with the anger. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never wanted you to be hurt." "Sansa." I know, Robb. I don't hold it against you. I never did." He frowned heavily and sat back. "I always said you were the stupid one." She threw her head back in silent laughter, and when she turned to catch his hands, Robb felt warmth flood over his chest. It had been so long since she had looked as young as she was. "There is too little kindness in this world for me to grudge it," she said, thumbs rubbing over his knuckles. "If we don't stick together, who will?" "I didn't. I died and you bore the price." "Here," he whispered, "in this world, Sansa, I will never hurt you like that." Sansa rested her head on his collarbone, and Robb closed his eyes and he thought, "I swear to all the gods, new and old and unheard, I will protect you." Months passed. Sansa grew muscles and calluses. She was used to long nights, and after a certain point, Robb had stopped following her to the Godswood regularly. Instead, she'd go with Lady and practice the movements that he'd already taught her. Her belief in slowly purging herself of the past had held as well. It got easier to tell Robb everything, from Cersei Lannister's deviancies to Peter Littlefinger's desires to Ramsay Bolton's cruelties. She still avoided everything about her death, though Robb had asked her multiple times were Sansa to remember the cut of the sword across her chest, she'd not be able to sleep for a full fortnight. When she thought about Daenerys Targaryen somewhere across the ocean, sleeping and surviving and raising an army to take back the Iron Throne, Sansa wanted to weep. She wanted to scream. She wanted to take a sharp-bladed sword and draw it across the last Targaryen's throat. Had she not demanded Jon come to her side, had she not uncovered the truth of his lineage, Sansa would have had him beside her. Sansa would not have watched as White Walkers invaded Winterfell, and Sansa would not have been helpless. No one can protect anyone, Sansa had believed, but she had come to rely on a dark-haired man far more than she had imagined. It had been aching to see him ride away. It had burned far worse to die. "Arya was alive last I heard," she said one morning, a whisper to Robb's ear on the way to breakfast. A week later, Jon took the Black. He was elected Lord Commander. When Robb was resting in the Godswood, sparring with her as they did once a week, she bared her teeth, angled her sword, and said, "Jon's men mutinied and killed him." Robb faltered, and Sansa took advantage, starting forwards with a steady, unfaltering barrage and forcing him back, until his back slammed against a weirwood tree. Her sword pressed against the line of his throat, wood against thin skin. "I thought you said Jon wasn't dead," he said lowly, hoarse through the scrape of the sword. She stepped back, sword dipping down. "A witch brought him back. He died and was brought back, and they called him the prince that was promised, Azor Ahai Reborn, whatever that means. It's something to do with a religion in Essos called Lord of Night or something. But when I died, Jon hadn't." "And where was he while you breathed your last?" Sansa breathed in sharply. "He was in King's Landing." She turned away, kneeling to gather her cloak and waterskin. Robb's eyes were accusing, angry, but she couldn't find it in herself to answer him fully just yet. "He should have protected you," he said. She whirled back to meet his gaze. "He should have," she agreed sharply. "But other things were happening. It wasn't his fault. He tried to protect me, to shield me from the worst of it. There's only so much a single person can do when the gods hate you." "Sansa, I died because of a lot of reasons," she said. "I died because father killed Lady and Joffrey killed father and the Freys killed you and mother and Theon burned Winterfell. None of that had to do with Jon. He kept me alive and helped me take back Winterfell. And when the person sitting on the Iron Throne commands you to come south, when that person has 3 dragons, you don't say no." She held his eyes for a long minute. When Robb didn't say anything, she grabbed her cloak and walked away. My thoughts as a reader. Wow, this story really pulled me in. It feels like I'm discovering Sansa all over again, but as someone completely different, stronger, older, sharper, like a blade. It's so fascinating to see her breaking out of her old image of the gentle lady and learning to hold a sword. Those scenes in the Godswood are vivid and atmospheric. I could almost feel the chill of the weirwood's bark on Robb's back, the exhaustion, and Sansa's sheer stubbornness. What strikes me most is her inner struggle, the memory of death, the pain of loss, and at the same time this fierce determination to change her family's fate. The dialogues with Robb are so genuine and warm that sometimes I even wanted to smile, despite how heavy the story is. They truly feel like brother and sister clinging to each other in the brutal world. The second chance idea is incredibly gripping. It's always a strong narrative hook. And here it works perfectly. We already know everything Sansa lost in the real timeline, so now every choice she makes feels so much more important. As a reader, I'm already dying to know what happens next. How she'll change the course of events, whether she'll manage to save her brothers and mother, and if she can hold on to this new strength and darkness inside her.